Lesson 6a, the respiratory system. The primary organ of the respiratory system is the lungs. This paired organ is found in the space of your chest, known as your thoracic cavity. The main function of the lungs is acquisition of oxygen to be used in cellular respiration, where ATP is generated at the mitochondria. The release of waste products, carbon dioxide and water to the outside of the body also occurs at the lungs. The respiratory system is closely integrated to both our circulatory system and the digestive system. The digestive system produces the necessary nutrient monomers, like glucose, that is required for cellular respiration. The circulatory system carries these nutrients from the gut, as well as carrying oxygen from the lungs, and transports both to the different cells of our body. We will discuss the respiratory system separately from the other organ systems, but it's very important to recognize how tightly integrated all the organ systems are in making a viable, functioning whole organism. The respiratory system has a number of functions which include providing us with a sense of smell, the ability to vocalize, and most importantly, the exchanging of oxygen and carbon dioxide. The system begins at the nose or mouth, where outside air is filtered of foreign particles by hair and cilia, as well as being warmed on its way to the lungs. As air is inhaled, they come into contact with little hair-like cellular projectiles called cilia that line the nasal cavity. These act to filter out foreign particles in the air that we breathe. When we inhale, chemicals will bind to the chemoreceptor cells in the nasal cavity and will create an electrical signal that will travel to the olfactory center of the brain for interpretation into smells. The air will then arrive at the back of the nose and mouth, called the pharynx. It can be directed to the larynx via the opening called the glottis. The larynx is where your voice box is located. Your vocal cords stretch across the opening of the larynx, called the glottis, and will vibrate as air passes through them, making sound. This is another very important role in the respiratory system, vocalization. Once air passes from the larynx through the glottis, it will travel to the lungs via the trachea. The windpipe, as is also known, is made of C-shaped cartilage rings, so that it's flexible while remaining open the whole while. Similar to a vacuum hose, which won't kink as it's bent, allowing a constant flow of air. Once the trachea reaches the lungs, it separates into two branches, one to the left lung and the other to the right lung. These are the left and right bronchus, or collectively, the two bronchi. These have a structure similar to the trachea. These in turn split up more and more into smaller diameter bronchi, when they finally reach the smallest diameter branches called bronchiole, where they no longer have cartilage rings. At the end of the bronchioles are little bubble-shaped sacs called alveoli, which is a site of gas exchange. These thin-walled sacs total 300 million in our lungs. The total surface area is 75 meters squared on average, and each is surrounded by blood capillaries to allow for gas exchange. To keep them from collapsing, the lungs produce something called a chemical surfactant that keeps them from closing up, which makes them constantly moist. The lungs are composed of 3 lobes to the right and only 2 to the left. That's to make room for the heart. The lobes themselves are made of lobules, which are bundles of alveoli. The lungs and the thoracic cavity are covered by serous membranes, called the pleural membranes, which are smooth and secretes fluids into the space between the two membranes, called the pleural cavity. The two membranes are very smooth, giving the appearance of them being wrapped in saran wrap. This reduces the friction between the lung and the thoracic cavity as they move across one another. Encasing the lungs is 12 pairs of ribs making the rib cage. That's to protect the lungs and the heart from trauma. In between the ribs are muscles called the intercostal muscles, which can contract to lift the rib cage up, helping you breathe. The bottom of the thoracic cavity is lined with a dome-shaped band of muscle called the diaphragm. The muscle contracts downward when inhaling and relaxes back to dome shape when exhaling.